Fantastic. Welcome very much. Welcome everyone. So my name's Lynn Bailey. I'm a Field Chief Data Officer at Databricks, and this is my colleague Dael, who will introduce himself in a moment. And today we're going to be talking about something that we like to call the rise of generative BI. And it's in partnership, obviously, with Databricks. Now, Databricks is a data and AI company. We're an incredibly experimental, product-led, innovative organization, and fundamentally, all of the things that Dael and I get to do, which is fantastic, is work with our customers and observe and hear about things that they're doing. And a lot of the developments that happen at Databricks are from our customers. So I'll stop there and let Dael just do a quick intro.
So I'm Dael. I am a field CTO. I cover EMEA, Middle East and Africa. I'm also a biochemist, so I joined the CTO world when it was really hard to do any of your job. You had to build the tech to do biotech. So I'm hoping that fundamentally part of this journey is that I fix that and get to go back to biotech in a few years. Now the cool thing is we're starting to see a change. So we built the story, I built it about a year ago. Because of some of the usage patterns that Databricks gets to see, we don't always follow like what we think is best for the market. We often follow what we see in terms of usage, what we see from the open source community, and the fundamentals of this movement of generative BI is like, how does AI and BI bridge? And it's this really weird thing that just started around about July last year. And it was around natural language as a programming language. So we hope you enjoy this, and really lovely to sort of be with you today.
Fantastic. Thanks, Dael. So we call it the missing middle. It was kind of a joking reference to what we think the missing middle is. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But before we do that, clearly generative AI more broadly is taking the world by storm. Unless you've been hiding under a rock, which I doubt anybody has, we know that this GenAI thing is absolutely massive. And you've got a combination of organizations who are really experimenting with it and kind of doing some great use cases and great experimentations. You've got CEOs who fundamentally believe that it's really going to revolutionize and change their business. And you've got an increased amount of performance for organizations that actually manage to leverage GenAI. But what about that missing middle? So as I said, it's something that Dael coined the phrase, I'm just jumping on the bandwagon. So the missing middle, or mind the gap, as we are in London. So that missing middle, and Dael will go into this in more detail, is essentially how do we bridge that gap between ambition and reality, between our tech functions and the business? And that's something that we're going to talk about today. I've been very lucky to work prior to Databricks at KPMG and prior to that at PwC as well. So two fantastic organizations, really kind of thriving, striving for growth, striving for change, and really trying to set the pace of change, very heavily leveraging technology. Now, one of the challenges with that is if you're an organization trying to transform through technology, quite often you forget that missing middle. So in both organizations, one of which was trying to really embrace CRM and another one that was really trying to embrace a new ERP system, there was this challenge of bridging the gap between what was a drive from technology and finance and marketing through to the business as well. But we'll hear a little bit more about missing middles now.
So missing middles like an observation that we've seen over many years. And it's this fundamental, like, many things problem. And I'll give you some examples. Often at events like this, we talk about innovation, and then we go back to our day jobs, and risk management stops us from doing anything. We have IT teams, and then we have business teams, and this giant chasm between the two. And they fundamentally operate differently, and they operate under a completely different rhythm. You know, the status quo, change management, executives who want something done, like GenAI, and then the end users who have to actually figure out how this works in reality. Like, we have seen this all the time, and it stifles any change that happens. And these are basically intelligence gaps that we sort of see across the organization. Now, there's a famous law in tech called Conway's Law. It basically talks about how the underlying software always resembles the organizational structure, and as a firm gets bigger, that tends to become increasingly siloed, and my group does this and your group does that. And I've seen some really mad examples. Like I was with a material science customer recently, and they have a business unit that also produces catalysts. So if you're in science and you know Science 101, catalyst makes an experiment go faster, right? They don't buy from each other, they buy from the market. And it's because they don't actually have a way to connect with each other. So we see this connective tissue being a massive problem in business today. So we're going to bookend this. Typically, we see a lot of questions that boards, that executives ask. How will generative AI impact my business? This is normally a top-level thing. And then at the bottom, you have this, how will we protect our amazing data and our IP, and what are we going to do about all of this stuff? And then in the middle, nobody's really having the conversation about how do we change this? And you're seeing some bold things from some people. Just this weekend, and it was really insane. The Klarna CEO just canceled the contracts with Salesforce and Workday because fundamentally those SaaS platforms are not serving the purpose of how he wants to take his business forward, both from a customer and both from an employee perspective. That's bold. That's crazy. But we see these resistances happen. So let's just really quickly cover, and I'm not going to go into war and peace on generative AI because I'm fairly certain you've heard this ad nauseum. But the reality is this stuff's pretty immature. So we have a research lab within Databricks, and our research lab have about 100 people building models, and we built the best model in the world for about 2 weeks. And it was really cool because we learned a lot in doing so, but this is becoming increasingly commodity. The interesting bit is, how do we increase accuracy? How do we change the dynamics of the model? How do we change the economics of the model? And these are areas, and we fundamentally are investing in. We also have the three series of Succession that happened in a weekend a year ago. But what that taught us was, can I couple my business to a model? Every time OpenAI does like a sort of release day, about 7 startups die. And that's fundamentally because they're baking too tightly coupled to the model. So what we're starting to see play out is the model start to move and drift into being a subset of the overall workflow and the overall, what we call a compound AI system. The other interesting thing that we see as a company who builds more of the plumbing is that 90% of companies are not going into production. This is because of lots of different reasons. But fundamentally, it's around complete control. People are wanting to own the IP of the model. They want to own the IP of that system. They want their data protected. They don't want PII data going into the wrong place. They want to maintain their IP. They want production quality. So they need something that gives them a little bit more assurance of what are the outcomes, and are these outcomes going to drive the right decisions. They also want to lower the costs. And we see this internally. So we have our own internal GenAI strategy. And one of our initial use cases was sending out prospecting emails. Who gets emails from vendors? Okay, my title happens all the time. Who gets emails from vendors that make no sense in the context of you as a buyer? So big RAG use case. One of the things we found with OpenAI was this was 7 cents an email. By fine-tuning using a low technique LoRa structure, we were able to create a Llama 3 model that was ½ cent an email and far more accurate. So these are things that are happening in the market, and we're starting to see that fundamentally it's about your data. It's about getting intelligence in place, and it's about how you use it. And we also know that eventually this will be massively powerful. So anyone who hasn't seen this, the MIT group that were able to find an antibiotic drug for the first time in 60 years from a model trained on empirical data. Now, what's true is we have a training platform for building AI models. You can build them in 9 days for 1 trillion tokens and fundamentally, have something that's yours. but it's very lumpy and very misunderstood, and people are not doing this in a continuum because they're still getting their feet wet and they're still realizing the mix of data and the quality of data needs to come right before they start to move into the AI. So let's shift and move into the answers at the bottom of the stack and how we're thinking about this.
I love being able to talk about the bottom, Dael.
It is the
Won't
most
talk about your
important
bottom.
part.
Okay, so fantastic. So as Dael's been talking about, it's all about data. How do we consolidate and protect our amazing data to enable all the things that we want to do? So clearly, from a Databricks perspective, we start with our lakehouse. We have great capabilities that are built into Lakehouse to enable us to really, truly enable ourselves through data. And what we've been doing at Databricks is fusing GenAI and that amazing capability with our existing great technology. And we've embedded all of the GenAI capability to enable us something that we call the Data Intelligence Platform. So this platform truly enables us enables you to democratize your data AI with your entire organization and do things, create this platform that's truly intelligent. Now, we've talked about missing middles, and Dael's mentioned some of the ones that are there. We almost had our own as well. So for us, this data intelligence engine, which is powered by GenAI, is something that fundamentally changes everything and plugs our gap, our missing middle. So again, we've talked about kind of the platform, but data is absolutely critical to GenAI and kind of what we're all trying to do at the moment. And the world of data governance is changing significantly. So even today, when we think about data governance, we're probably thinking about structured data, we're probably thinking about data councils and policies and incredibly slow and complex processes, somebody else's problem somewhere over there that's incredibly boring and difficult to deal with. But we need to tackle that. It's an absolute game changer if we get this right. So today, governance needs to cover more than just structured text. It needs to cover all of the unstructured stuff that we deal with. It needs to cover AI models and federation and all those things as well. And the other challenge as well is governance needs to move away from being such a manual burden and significant amounts of friction for people to engage with. Otherwise, we're just not going to do governance correctly, and it has such a positive impact when done right on what we're trying to do. And then another thing that we need to consider is these metadata silos. So the way to fuel this amazing data intelligence platform, the GenAI enabled data analysis, etc., is through understanding that metadata. That metadata is the key to knit together all of these amazing sources of data. But today they're trapped in silos. We know that there are silos, they've existed for some time, but if we can unlock this, it's truly going to enable us. So whether they're silos from an asset perspective, whether it's our data, whether it's reporting, these are all silos and metadata that we need to be able to connect together. We need to create that transparency and interoperability between these various metadata silos. So what we're aiming for is unified data consolidation and governance and sharing in one platform. And Databricks is uniquely positioned to be able to do this. So we're the only platform that spans data, BI, and AI. We have Lakehouse Federation for federation across the entire enterprise, regardless of your data sources. And we have AI-powered governance and analytics for all users. Well, what about the answers in the middle?
So let's get to the middle. So one of the weird things that happened around about July last year is we started to see this big shift, and we made an announcement at our summit that we believe, and it was based on Andre Karpathy's observation, that English or natural language would be the new interface. And I mean, fundamentally, sitting on a tube and watching a whole lot of people type on the smallest keyboard in the world, that's just stupid. It is really weird and strange to watch. Now, what we also know is that AI is being embedded in existing workflow today, and in some ways in very tedious, very bizarre, really strange ways. But it's helping us to kind of learn how things work. We also know that there's a bit of an arms race as to what the next interface is going to be. And I had this really fun experience last year where I was sitting at a table with a whole bunch of AI executives from different companies, and we were having a debate on who would be the first to allow Elon to put something in their brain. I'm also from the same part of the world as him, and I wouldn't want him to put anything in my brain. So one of the things that we see with most customers is actually there's a huge maturity journey that happens. And a lot of companies today are still on Excel. And then they move to business intelligence. And business intelligence, as far as I'm concerned, has very limited intelligence. And it is one of the most underwhelming capabilities. I used to be a customer for many years, and I always found it bizarre that if you go to your BI layer thinking I can ask a bunch of questions and I can get answers, or run a bunch of queries and get questions, you're not going to learn much about your business except for a few numbers. This is because, fundamentally, if you look top to bottom, a human, an agent or actor, has skills to read dashboards. It's a very narrow view, but all that's happening is data is being squeezed to form information, which is then put into cubes to create analytics. There are huge gaps in that. And as a company, we see that because we process a lot of varieties of different data. Now, the impact of that, and we've measured this across a number of different companies, is about 30% of productivity loss. That is the resulting emails that are sent to ask questions of the data. That is the resulting PowerPoints that are produced with a copy of the dashboard and an annotated little bubble to say this is what the hell the number's saying to you. Again, completely insane. So like the keyboard, we are really not serving businesses through an intelligent layer. We're basically reporting. So we had this really fun thing last year in July where 3 projects independently kicked off. The first one was a major shoe company who told me at an event, we've just done all this work and created new financial reporting framework, and the first question that our financial controllers asked is, how do I export this to Excel? Beautiful dashboards, export to Excel. The second one is a really cool story where a CTO said to me, I need to manage my CEO. Every week he reads a bunch of dashboards and sends 50 emails and completely paralyzes my team because we all strive to answer those emails. And then the third one was a project that we were doing internally, which we called Project 1B. So how do we get a BI layer to reach 1 billion people? And this was a fundamental way of thinking about how do we build the best text-to-SQL model on the planet? And that was really where we started with this. And coalescing these 3 things together, what we started to see was this very interesting, arrangement of like, actually, how do we build engines and compound systems that allow you to have accuracy and talk to your data and ask questions, and then also have the ability, when those questions are wrong, to fix them and to create instructions and to create a whole lot of things. And this has effectively become something we called Project Genie internally, which kicked off and has been announced by our company as the AI BI platform, which is basically a part of our combination play. And what that means is, on top of our warehouse and our governance layer, we're able to build a text-to-SQL interface. And it's both an API, so that it makes way for whatever the future interface is going to be, but it is also something you could put a prompt dashboard in front of. And from first principles, which is a fundamental value of the company, we're all academics, it drives our sales organization insane. We have recrafted the stack. So you take your original actor, and the skills that they provide, that comes in the form of the questions that they ask. So nowadays, we capture, what are your questions of your data? Internally, I'm a business unit CTO, so I have lots of questions when I look at company telemetry. So I write them down and I give them to our team, and they capture them as instructions. Basically, it's a prompt library. We take context and semantics and we build that out so that we understand our fiscal cycle runs from February until January, and it is able to work out what a quarter is based on the natural language and interpreting that and making it very relevant to us. And that model that we've created, we expose that so that it's the IP of every one of our customers. We do not want to hold that IP. It's too litigious and painful. What we're also able to do under the hood is combine information that we've squeezed out of data in a table setting way, but we're also able to pull in context, reports, some of the email responses, and actually build a rich library of cross-functional data that sits in the data set and then is able to build these compound AI systems that then feed into that governance layer and derive the insights that you want, therefore killing that whole need for sending 50 emails. So in this example that I was talking about, the CEO, we took his emails as a data set, we created a prompt library. The good thing about CEOs is they write one-liners, so it's basically a good prompt. And we were able to create this, this rich library of prompts and train the model on that. When we put this in front of the CEO, all of the questions that he typically would have of the data, most of them were answered. We went from 50 to 1. We're able to see a lot of patterns in the emails and actually learn a lot about using email as a pipeline. Have you ever thought about a data pipeline where email is your source data? Have you ever thought about a pipeline where the responses to the email is source data? It's really tricky because you have to carve out a bunch of things like where you went for coffee versus this is a legitimate business question. And this has given us a lot of insights into how people are experimenting. But also, what it meant for the CTO who was trying to manage his CEO, no more emails, or far fewer emails, or emails about the market, or emails going to that aspirational outside in versus inside out. So that's the new thing that they're trying to tackle. So then, those of you in the room are probably asking yourself, okay, great, where do we get started with all this?
Thanks, Dael. So how do we get started? Well, I think, first of all, it's really important to clarify the problem and the potential. It's important to recognize there is an issue and a potential series of opportunities for you. So, as mentioned earlier, Dael's talked about some of those potential missing middles, so how you balance innovation with risk mitigation, etc. And then there's something around every organization has those processes within them that you're just, what the hell? What the hell are those processes? And are there things that are just, today, you take a step back and go, why are we doing things this way, that you could potentially look at as an opportunity to get started? So let's think about compliance. We all have to do it. It's getting more difficult. We've got compliance across every sector. GenAI is actually creating its more regulation and compliance, which we'll talk about in a moment as well. And we've got that. How do we find out what that total cost is? So on the left-hand side, you've got questions that we might be asking ourselves. On the right-hand side, you've got questions that are being asked in about the organization. And then you've probably got a chief risk officer or some kind of legal counsel who are actually, they want to know, are we meeting regulatory compliance? And today, much in the same way that we've kind of done the analysis and determined that there's a 30% productivity challenge around BI more generally, this fragmented view of all these various different elements of process to get to that answer can cost as much as 10% of revenue, particularly if you're highly regulated. So why don't we create this compliance AI application, something that could be broad-reaching, domain-centric AI application that could help answer this question? It could connect those data sets and start to reduce the overhead of conforming whether we're compliant or not. I mean, obviously, I worked for KPMG and PwC, and I wouldn't want to take these kind of revenue streams away from them, but I think this is something that we could definitely be exploring as organizations. It could be an absolute game changer in that compliance. And as I mentioned before, compliance and regulation are getting even more complicated and even more tricky. We've got all these elements of legislation that are out there. We've got the EU AI Act, which is there as well. We've got a US executive order and many, many different ways in which organizations, government bodies are really trying to regulate what we're doing with AI and GenAI. Okay, so I get to do a bit of a summary here. So a key takeaway. Hopefully what you've taken away for today is that you really need to be wise about what you do with all of your data and keep it really simple. So from an organizational perspective, it's educating your organization on that AI maturity. Get your total data house in order. whenever you take on a new role, or say you're taking over a business as an example, what's the first thing that you would do? You'd probably do a bit of a stock take, maybe even before you actually joined that business. So make sure that you're getting a stock take on your data and getting that in order. Run those boring AI experiments, so whether it's the cost of compliance, answering those questions that the chief risk officer is asking you, or whether it's the CEO who's asking all those various different questions on your business intelligence dashboards. Run those experiments, and then believe that data intelligence can truly unlock the middle, which is what we strongly believe. Okay, Dael, anything you wanted to add on that?
Yeah, so lastly, we'd like to invite you all to a party. Please take a photo. We've got this event from 6:30 until 10 o'clock tonight. If you use the QR code, we will be there a bit later, and it'd be great to have you all there. And we'd really love to thank you all in this loud, insane place for taking the time to listen to our weird and wonderful observations of this crazy market that we live within, and some of the really fascinating experiments that lots of our customers are doing around the world. And actually it comes out of open source and out of various communities. It's truly amazing, and it's a brilliant time to be in this world. So thank you very much for giving us your time.